This is Frank Jones, and I'm sitting here with Dave Seastrom, and we're talking about the Indiana Forestry Alliance and the concerns that those folks have about the logging going on at Yellowwood State Forest. Let's get right into it. I was most interested in the price breakdown and the information that is given to us from the product that they're taking from our state forest. What are your thoughts on that, Dave, as far as the market value, and are they getting the market value, I guess is the question.
The answer would be no. In fact, because they have to post what they received whenever they sell a tract of timber, we're able to calculate what the final cost is, and typically they're selling our timber at 40% below market. And even more egregious than that, in my opinion, is the fact that a great deal of it is being shipped to China in whole logs,
really?
In shipping containers, and then coming back to the United States as finished product, which is hurting the Indiana woodworking business. Several flooring manufacturers have complained bitterly that they can't even have access to premium Indiana logs. In fact, in a recent development, there was an office that was remodeled in IU, and they wanted Indiana hardwood. So they were able to buy logs, ship them to China, have them made into paneling, and it was installed back in Indiana.
Is their argument that it's cheaper to do that than have it done here in the state?
Oh, absolutely. And of course, the Chinese subsidize their industries, and we do not.
I guess another question that comes to mind in this, we do have a little bit of a footprint of what happens after it leaves the state of Indiana. In regards to who has their finger in this proverbial pie, how much of that information do we have as to who benefits from these sales after they leave Indiana? Is there an entity at work there that... Obviously, is this a private industry, I guess, would be a good question there? Or is this something that the state has instigated with a private industry? Do we know any of that? Do we have any of that information?
The way a timber sale works is that private logging concerns bid on the trees that are owned by the state of Indiana, which is you and I. What they do with that afterwards is entirely their own choice. There is no guideline. There are no rules that have to be followed.
Once it hits the market, per se.
Once it hits the market. So we do know that a great deal of our forest that's being harvested is being turned into pallets, which is a low-end use for this material.
It's just scrap wood.
That's exactly it. And it's, rather than go through and select very high quality trees for, high-end furniture, musical instruments, and etc., the bulk of what goes out of our forests is actually of low value.
Of low value, but of low value on the market. Of
Correct.
High value in the setting of a controlled forest. So essentially,
forest.
yes, and essentially you're taking a 300-year-old tree and turning it into pallet wood. Is that correct?
Well, first of all, it's very unlikely we have any trees that are 300 years old.
True that.
We have documented trees that are 170 plus years old, and typically a large intact tree won't be used for pallet wood because of its high value.
Okay, because I know that they are bringing, I know that there's a premium for oak wood right now.
Yes.
I know that barrel slats are huge in that.
White oak.
Spiking, and white oak is at a premium. I had a good friend of mine just down the street from me sell 30 white oak trees, and he got $30,000 straight up for it. Which is market price, because if they're good sized trees, 20 inches and above, something like that, you're gonna end up getting a pretty good price out of them. So this brings the question in my mind: do we have a real concise view of who benefits from these sales? Obviously, it's not the state. They're selling them 40% below market value.
Well, that's a good question. We do know that the DNR was defunded and that they now acquire about 40% of the Department of Forestry's operating costs from logging activity. Now, they consistently say that this is not the motivation behind the 400% increase in the rate of logging, but the money speaks for itself.
Right. That's where you could kind of trace that.
Yes.
That activity, and I would be very interested to find out how it returns to us, at what price it returns to us, and the breakdown therein from what we sell it to what we see it come back as. That is a gray area in my book that I would want to see rectified. Because obviously, if someone's selling a product for 40% under the market value, there's something happening on the other end, as they always say, where no, they're not making that money because they're not getting the premium price. So who is? If they're selling it at a loss, where does that come out on the other end? They're not going to sell it for a loss and throw their hands up and say, oops, we took a loss, are they?
Well, okay, the philosophy behind a lot of this timber sale is their idea of how to manage a forest, which is to cut the forest down. And their belief is that they are creating a young forest by doing that, which is technically correct, but because of the way they are conducting the logging, they're spreading invasive species, and they're actually harming the return of the kind of species they're promoting, which is oak hickory. In a natural forest, you have winners and losers, and an old tree falls to the ground, and young trees that actually are quite small in diameter, might be several years old, but as soon as that light hits them, they spring into the air and become the giants that surround us.
Right.
So what we're seeing with the kind of clear cutting is that what we are getting is lots of tulip poplar and almost no oak and hickory.
And that is cutting down on the diversity of the trees that are in our forest, inviting invasive species, as you said. And I personally have gone down Du Bois Ridge.
There you go.
I personally have seen the absolute destruction. Now, I've seen logging. I've worked logging. I've cut wood a lot in my life. And you do not ever leave the mess and the stacked up tops and the whatever it is, and the ground's just cut up into ditches the way they did it. It's just, it's a smack in the face after you're dropping 40% off your market price. And oh, by the way, they're leaving the area completely decimated.
Well, Du Bois Ridge is a classic example
Oh my
of
God,
mismanagement.
it's sad.
The ruts that, the giant feller bunchers that went in there and clear cut that area left these enormous ruts that fill with water in the summer and breed mosquitoes.
Yep.
I mean, you can't even hike into it at all because of the brush. You can't see where the holes are. And interestingly, that Du Bois Ridge cut was conducted by the Hamilton Logging Company, right out of Martinsville. They are the very ones who received the contract to do the logging in the backcountry, an area that's considered so pristine, so special, that Governor Bob Orr set it aside as a preservation area in 1981. That was reversed by Governor Mitch Daniels. This is part of why we feel it's so important to have legislation in place to codify how the forest is managed, because we're seeing inconsistent management from one administration to the next.
Right, right. Inconsistent and almost at odds management from one administration to the next. The question I would have, and I grew up in Brown County, and this is something that I automatically tie in whenever there's a situation starting, let's say the maple leaf, the logging, all these different issues that come up in Brown County are at the backdrop of the tourist industry.
Right.
Because that's what we do.
That's what we have.
Our industry. Has there been or has there even been suggested an impact study done on the fact that anyone wanting to drive down a country lane may well now see a decimated area that does not fit with what we want Brown County to represent?
Well,
How's this going to impact the tourist industry? And that's not, I don't think, being even addressed.
actually, we've contacted the Brown County Visitors and Convention Bureau.
Oh, outstanding.
And they have written to the governor of Indiana requesting that he halt the timber sale in the backcountry.
Outstanding.
And they have implied that
Good step.
the loss of our forest would dramatically impact
Mm-hmm.
the amount of tourism that we have. Now, this is hard to quantify.
Exactly. And that is a it's somewhat of a prayer, quite honestly.
Yeah, well,
in
we'd
my
love
book,
to see some hard numbers behind it.
because that's something that I would suggest. At this point, it's a prayer. With impact studies done, it may well be something that there are hard numbers to look at.
I'm concerned, Frank, that the time we will have hard numbers is after the forest has been
You
removed.
are unfortunately probably correct there on that.
You know, because what we have now is an intact forest that's being impacted, and
Mm-hmm.
people are seeing it every day. I mean, every day in Brown County during season, you see logging trucks loaded to the gills heading down our roads.
Right. The question that I would, and that we see all too often, and more, quoting your own site there for the kids there at the IFA, that the Indiana Forestry Alliance says that logging has gone up 400% since 2002.
That's correct.
That's scary.
Well, and we went from preserving 40% of our state forest to preserving almost nothing.
Here's a question that I really have to ask the political folks in charge in Indiana. You're into Yellowwood right now. You've decimated entire swaths of that state forest for monetary gain. When is Turkey Run going on the block? When is Spring Mill going on the block? Where there are 400-year-old trees, where there are trees that are exemplary of the forest that once stood in Indiana that will eventually be gone for money's sake. This is this really bothers me.
Well, ironically, the DNR uses the state parks as an example of areas that they are in fact preserving.
Mm-hmm.
And that's factual.
Yeah.
So they do not log in the state parks unless there are danger trees, if you will, that threaten hikers or campers.
Mm-hmm.
But this is a highly managed nature experience. It's not the same thing as going out into wild forest land like the backcountry.
Right, like what you would say the Hoosier National Forest or something
and the
like
Hoosier
that.
National Forest is a federally protected state
Right.
forest. Federally protected forest, not state forest.
Now, is that seeing any logging?
No,
business
not in
going
the
through there?
Deem. Not in the Deem wilderness. That's protected. Now, the Hoosier National does get logged, but it's being managed by the federal government, which is entirely different than how we
Understandable.
are
Yeah.
managing our state forests, which, frankly, Indiana is the only state that manages the forest, their state forests, the way we do. I mean, you have examples like Pennsylvania where some 40% of their state forests are preserved. You have similar numbers in Illinois and Michigan and Ohio. We have chosen to turn our state forests into industrial tree farms.
Essentially, that's absolutely right. That's a frightening prospect for anyone who's ever driven through Yellowwood State Forest and at one time enjoyed the long hikes through the undisturbed woods. Those may well be a thing of the past here coming up shortly. So this is something I think everyone should be involved with. Democracy is not a spectator sport. We need to get people out and let them know that this is happening, the reasons this is happening, and the inability to find transparency in the activities of the folks involved. And that's something that I think everybody is hoping to find out. And hopefully we can end this practice, or at least curtail it in the short term.
Well, I believe the goal that many of us share is to preserve a portion of our state forest,
Sure.
say 30, 40%, or whatever the actual final number is, and then slow down on the rate of logging and the way they are logging. So there's a mix of forest management, and it's not a monoculture. It's not one approach. And in fact, what they're doing is experimental. So if what they are doing doesn't work, we stand to lose it all.
Well, I can say after driving, like I said, after driving down Du Bois Ridge, you can see how they're going to leave it. If they're doing it for the right reasons, if they're doing it for the wrong reasons, the footprint that they're leaving does not bode well for their intentions.
Well, for the next few generations, anywhere that the DNRs practice their current logging methods, we'll be able to see Jack Seaford cuts. And it's a testament to an industrial approach to logging, and one, frankly, that I believe is harming our state forests.
We'd like to thank Dave Seastrom for coming on the show today and giving us the information that he has in regards to the Yellowwood State Forest. Dave, if folks want to find out more information on this, where's a site or information you might have?
Well, I would go to indianaforestalliance.org. We also have a Facebook page. It's full of great information. You can follow the links and become informed. And there is lots of action that you can help us with. And I would urge everyone that cares about this to do that. Thank you very much.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Frank.
Thanks, Dave. Groovy.
Groovy.